So just this past weekend, Islam Makhachev successfully defended his UFC welterweight title for the first time against Ian, the I-Dubs of MMA, Gary, and by doing so, has all but established himself as one of the greatest fighters to ever live. Regardless of the criteria you use to determine who the greatest of all time is, you have to put him in the top 3 at the very least. By beating Ian Gary, Islam Makhachev has not only defeated the number 1 contender in a higher weight class, but has also broken Anderson Silva's record for the most consecutive wins in UFC history. For some people, he's already the greatest fighter of all time. Others still have John Jones and GSP in front of him. And personally, I've added Islam into my own personal top 3 along with GSP and Mighty Mouse, since my own personal GOAT criteria excludes confirmed PED cheats. Although, spoiler alert for a topic later on in this video, Makhachev probably isn't perfectly clean himself. Anyways, when it comes to Islam Makhachev and also Khabib Nurmagomedov, their greatness is very clear. Islam is a top 3 fighter of all time in the sport, and Khabib is one of the greatest lightweights and the second biggest star in the history of MMA behind his rival Conor McGregor. But in the wake of this win, I've been seeing a narrative being pushed that needs to be addressed, and that is the mythologizing of Team Khabib as a fight team. In other words, ceaselessly glazing the fighters who trained with Abdulmanap and Khabib Nurmagomedov at their gym in Dagestan while ignoring everything bad or negative about them. And while I wouldn't care at all if it were run-of-the-mill fans glazing Team Khabib, it is undeniably a problem with the entirety of MMA media when ESPN MMA posts this on both their Instagram and Twitter. 109 wins and 2 losses. The current combined record of Team Khabib is absolutely ridiculous. One man's vision, father's plan. And when I see this, I feel genuinely insulted as a fan of the sport. Anybody who watches even the UFC prelims could tell you that this 109 and 2 record is clearly fake. We'll go into this in depth later, but Tagir Ulanbekov by himself has 3 losses, and he's a part of the core Dagestani crew. Seriously, Islam Makhachev himself corners Tagir, and he's conveniently excluded from the combined record of Team Khabib because he doesn't fit the narrative. And not only is ESPN posting this fake statistic, but they're pinning it to the top of their MMA Instagram page where it's gotten over 600,000 likes, and on Twitter, it's gotten over 5 million impressions. And this presents a genuine problem for discourse in mixed martial arts, because we have what most normies and casual fans consider to be a reputable source in sports media spreading disinformation in order to gas up a single team. So in this video, let's look through the records of some of the fighters who train out of that mega gym in Dagestan that don't fit the narrative that ESPN and the Team Khabib Glazers, most of whom aren't Dagestani themselves, are trying to spread to the casual audience of this sport. And then, on top of that, let's look at the very, very suspicious trend that exists among the fighters from Team Khabib. A trend that might make you wonder if the gym is engaging in some illicit pharmaceutical practices as a team. And then, at the end, let's examine why everything related to Khabib Nurmagomedov and his teammates end up getting mythologized and overblown instead of being treated with any sort of objectivity. And before I continue, I do want to reiterate that what Islam Makhachev and Khabib Nurmagomedov have accomplished in mixed martial arts is indeed incredibly impressive. The problem is that both fans and MMA media go out of their way to elevate everything and everyone related to them to an absurd degree. But anyways, without further waiting, let's get started. So beginning with the record audit of Team Khabib, let's first take a look at who ESPN MMA have included in their fall statistics. There's Khabib, of course, then Islam, Umar and Usman Nurmagomedov, and then John Pork. And their combined professional record in mixed martial arts is 109 and 2. Which results in this select group of Dagestanis having a win rate of approximately 98.2%. And now, there's a number of reasons why selecting these guys in particular makes no sense whatsoever from ESPN. If you were going to include only active fighters from this gym, Khabib obviously wouldn't be in the mix. And if you're only going to count UFC fighters, Usman Nurmagomedov can't be counted either. At least not yet. This sampling of Dagestanis is completely arbitrary. And really, the only reason why ESPN chose to book John Pork, who is clearly not on the level of someone like Islam or Umar or Usman, is because he is currently undefeated in MMA. So since ESPN has set no other criteria for including fighters in this collective record besides their Dagestanis who train with Khabib, let's go through a number of notable fighters from that gym and recalculate something that is closer to the real Team Khabib record. Now, granted, I can't go through literally every single Dagestani, especially the ones who are out there fighting in Eagle FC, ACA, Brave CF, and UAE Warriors. So I'll be going through the records of fighters who have competed in major promotions like the UFC, Bellator, PFL, and Ryzen. So, starting with a fighter who actually is a real, genuine core member of Khabib's inner circle, let's talk about Tagir Ulanbekov. Tagir Ulanbekov is a flyweight who has a professional record of 17 wins and 3 losses, which is still a very good record, and his losses are to Zhalgas Zhumagulov, a current Octagon champion and former UFC fighter, Tim Elliott, and Kyoji Horiguchi. Now, none of those losses are truly bad losses, and from what I've heard, the Zhalgas fight was apparently a robbery, and the Tim Elliott fight was close as well, so the only real devastating defeat that Tagir has taken is to Kyoji Horiguchi. But if you go back and watch what Kyoji Horiguchi did to Tagir, you would genuinely start to feel bad for the guy. Kyoji dropped him multiple times, destroyed his calf so badly that he had to switch stances, and then choked him unconscious. And Tagir is a core member of that team. He literally had Islam Makhachev cornering him for that fight with Horiguchi. And on that same UFC fight night in Qatar, another member of Team Khabib, who Islam was cornering, lost. And that guy is Sajid Isgakmaev. Isgakmaev is 22-4 in his professional career, and while you may think that's an impressive record, if you go and look at his resume, you'll see that it's as shallow as Dagestan's gene pool. Isgakmaev's best win throughout his entire professional career is his win over Shinya Aoki in one championship. And not only was Shinya Aoki fighting up a weight class because of one's dumb hydration tests, but he was 39 years old at the time of the fight. That's the best win on Isgakmaev's resume. And back in UAE Warriors, Isgakmaev got choked out cold by Carlston Harris, a guy who went 4-4 in the UFC and got cut after going on a 3-fight losing streak. And now that he's in the UFC, Sajid has gone 0-2 after losing to 41-year-old Nicolas Dalby and Abubakar Vagaev in 2 back-to-back snooze fests. Moving on to another welterweight, let's talk about the black sheep of the family, Abubakar Nurmagomedov. And here again, it's clear that Abubakar is a core member of the team. He literally trained under Abdul Manap. And Abubakar's record in professional mixed martial arts is 17-4-1, with a 2-2 record in the UFC. And one of those losses in the UFC was a first-round submission loss to David Zawada. And once you're finished watching this video, I want everybody to go and watch this fight between Abubakar and David Zawada because it's currently up on YouTube. This loss is genuinely dreadful. It really is that bad. David Zawada catches Abubakar Nurmagomedov off his back with the most basic triangle choke from full guard that you'd learn in the first week of jiu-jitsu class as a brand new white belt. And then Abubakar
tap like chicken.
And then David Zawada went on to lose every other fight he had in the UFC. Abubakar hasn't fought in over 3 years now, and he's probably retired at this point. But he's genuinely a terrible fighter by UFC standards. And now, moving on to another core member of Khabib's inner circle, there's Ikram Aliskerov. And now, Ikram Aliskerov is a solid fighter. He's a ranked middleweight with a record of 18 wins and 2 losses. And those losses are to Robert Whittaker and Hamzat Chimaev, which there's no shame in. He doesn't have any really elite wins, but he's kind of like Tagir in that sense. He's at that ranked gatekeeper level, where he beats all of the guys outside of the rankings, but ends up getting slimed out by elite competition. And now, moving on to the final significant Team Khabib guy who has competed in the UFC, there's Zubair Tukhugov, who has a professional record of 20 wins, 6 losses, and 1 draw. Now, Zubair Tukhugov hasn't fought since 2023. But hey, ESPN is counting Khabib's record, and Khabib retired in 2020, so Zubair Tukhugav's fights are, frankly, the more relevant of the two. Zubair Tukhugov went 5-3 in the UFC, which is respectable, and his losses are to Renato Moicano, Hakeem Dawodu, and Elvis Brenner. Moicano is clearly very good, but Hakeem Dawodu and Elvis Brenner are kinda Like, they aren't elite by UFC standards. And when Zubair Tukhugov lost to Hakeem Dawodu, he missed weight at featherweight by 4 pounds. And when he fought Elvis Brenner up at lightweight, he pulled the Bryan Battle special by yet again missing weight up a weight class, that time by 1.5 pounds. Zubair Tukhugov is the definition of a weight bully and is mid on top of that, and he is a bona fide Team Khabib guy. And now, moving on to all of the main Team Khabib guys who haven't competed in the UFC, let's start by talking about Gadzi Rabadanov, who is actually scheduled to fight the day after I'm releasing this video. And now, while he is technically 27-5-2, I'm just going to put him down as being 28-5-2 because his opponent is a short notice replacement who is 12-5, and I don't see Gadzi losing that fight. Gadzi Rabadanov was pretty dominant in Bellator and the PFL, getting wins over former UFC guys like Mark Diakiese and Kevin Lee, and beating Koji Takeda in the Bellator vs. Ryzen event. But still, he had those losses earlier on in his career, and he also ended up losing to Alfie Davis recently, who is alright, but, not great. And then there's Ahmed Magomedov, a much lesser known featherweight Dagestani fighter who is 11-2, with his losses being to AJ McKee and Henry Corrales. Now, to be fair, AJ McKee is incredibly good, but the version of Henry Corrales that Ahmed fought and lost to wasn't the best, since Henry Corrales was at the tail end of his MMA career and went on to lose to both Kai Kamaka and Aaron Pico afterwards. And now we come to the final guy on this list, who, depending upon how you view things, may be the real black sheep of Team Khabib. And here I'm talking about Magomed Magomedov. Magomed Magomedov is 22-5 and is also going to fight the day after this video is released, albeit I don't really know who is going to win between him and Daniel Marcos. And now, the first of Magomedov's losses is against Petr Yan, who he is technically 1-1 with, although the first fight they had was a robbery. But then, we have the rest of Magomedov's losses, and those are to Raufeon Stots, Sergio Pettis, and Patchy Mix. Twice. And yes, the second fight between Patchy Mix and Magomedov was close, and Patchy Mix did test positive for weed. But trust me when I say this, as you can tell by the size of Magomed Magomedov's nipple in this Tapology photo, we're gonna get to talking about real positive tests soon. And look, the results of the second fight don't change the fact that Magomedov was rendered limp, completely unconscious, and unable to defend himself by Patchy Mix. And here's the thing with Raufeon Stots and Sergio Pettis. Both of those guys have been finished by Patchy Mix, with Pettis getting choked out and Stots getting knocked unconscious with a knee. And Sergio Pettis rendered Magomed Magomedov, a member of the almighty Team Khabib, as is proven by how Khabib was cornering him during that fight, unconscious via spinning elbow, and you can see Khabib's live reaction here. So, Magomed Magomedov, a teammate of Khabib who is competing in a major MMA promotion, is a 4-time Patchy Mix victim, twice directly and twice by proxy. Which means that if you think Patchy Mix is bad for having had the run in the UFC he did, and then going on to lose in Ryzen to 19-year-old Koma Akimoto by KO, then you have to admit that Magomed Magomedov is genuinely atrocious. Now, granted, I personally think that this has more to do with Mario Bautista and Koma Akimoto being very good, but it doesn't change the fact that Patchy Mix completely owns full custody of Magomed Magomedov. And now that we are finished doing our little record audit, we can finally calculate the actual record of Team Khabib. And that record is 264 wins, 33 losses, and 4 draws. And look, that is still a very, very good record for an MMA team. But those extra 33 losses and 4 draws don't look as pretty as the 2 on ESPN's post, do they? And if you calculate their win rate, you'll see that it drops from 98.2% to 88.8%. And if you include the 4 draws, that drops further to 87.7%. And while that's still solid, don't forget that many of these guys built their records against jobbers on the regional scene. Frankly, it further highlights how great Islam Makhachev is as a fighter, since 18 of his 29 wins have taken place in the UFC, where you really can't stat pad wins. Unless your name is Sean O'Malley, of course. So yeah, Team Khabib, Eagles MMA, Abdul Manap's School of Mixed Martial Arts, whatever you want to call them, they're clearly a very good team. But they aren't what the mainstream MMA media want casuals to believe they are. Going by the standards of major promotions, many of these guys are perfectly average, and some of them are genuinely bad, like genuinely awful. Seriously, I still can't get out of my mind how Abu Bakr got submitted like that. I knew he was bad, but I'd never gone and watched one of his fights before, so I didn't know how bad. And he is that bad. However, before we move on, what if I were to tell you that there was one member of Team Khabib that ESPN MMA decided not to put in their original graphic, even though he is technically a former undefeated champion in a major MMA promotion? Seriously, if we're going off of just stats, ESPN should have included him with Khabib, Islam, Umar, Usman, and John Pork, because he would have boosted that combined record by 23 wins. But the fact he isn't leads me to the second part of this video. And now let's talk about the elephant in the room, which are the drug tests. 4 fighters who are currently members of Team Khabib and 1 fighter who was associated with them previously have tested positive for performance-enhancing substances. The 4 fighters are Islam Makhachev, Usman Nurmagomedov, Zubair Tukhugov, and Movlid Khaybulaev. And the guy who technically isn't a member of Team Khabib, but used to train with him in the past, is Ruslan Magomedov. And when it comes to Movlid Khaybulaev, Zubair Tukhugov, and Ruslan Magomedov's positive tests, there are 0 excuses that can be made. Starting with the least egregious drug test failure, let's talk about Islam Makhachev's positive test for meldonium. This happened all the way back in 2016, and USADA cleared him after the fact for having taken the medication for a supposed heart condition without intending to cheat. And this means that Islam Makhachev is technically clean, and he's reportedly passed every drug test since, although there are still questions that need to be raised. And then there's Usman Nurmagomedov, who tested positive for a prohibited substance in 2023, around the time of Bellator 300, where he fought Brent Primus. For testing positive, he received a 6-month suspension and a $50,000 fine from the California State Athletic Commission, and the win over Brent Primus was overturned to a no contest. This then led to his very trustworthy manager, Ali Abdelaziz, coming out and stating it came from a prescribed medication for an illness, and that it was not an anabolic steroid, EPO, HGH, or another performance enhancer. And now, if it was a prescribed medication for an illness, you would think that Ali and Team Khabib would be fine with the world knowing what Usman tested positive for, right? But for some reason, the details regarding what he tested positive for were limited by an agreement and haven't been revealed to the public. And well, why would Usman get fined $50,000 by the State Athletic Commission if Ali could prove that the medication was for an illness? Just, a lot of things aren't adding up here. Which then leads me to Movlid Khaybulaev, a longtime training partner and teammate of Khabib who is 23-0-1. So, 23 wins, 0 losses, 1 draw. The guy I was talking about earlier. A guy who also trained under Abdul Manap himself. Movlid tested positive for recombinant erythropoietin, or REPO, from an in-competition sample collected on August 1st of 2025, right after winning the PFL Featherweight World Tournament final against Jesus Pinedo, a fight where Khabib cornered him. USADA issued a 1-year suspension, and the PFL stripped him of the title and the belt. And the fact that Khaybulaev tested positive for EPO in an in-competition drug test is about as damning of a drug test failure as there can possibly be. Recombinant erythropoietin, which increases the production of red blood cells in the body, has a half-life that varies between 4 and 13 hours, making it incredibly difficult to detect because of how quickly it leaves a user's system. It's not just quite possible, but incredibly likely that Mavlid, or perhaps Mavlid's cornerman, got a syringe and shot Mavlid up with some EPO in the arena locker room. And speaking of more inexcusable drug test failures, there's Zubair Tukhugov and Ruslan Magomedov both testing positive for the SARM Ostarine in a test administered on September 7th of 2016. And not only that, Zubair Tukhugov failed another drug test on October 29th of the same year, which led to him claiming that this was because of a contaminated supplement, but the evidence didn't add up, which all resulted in him getting a 2-year suspension. And with Ruslan Magomedov, he ended up racking up 3 USADA doping violations, leading to him getting permanently banned from the UFC. And during that time, when Zubair Tukhugov and Ruslan Magomedov failed those drug tests for the same substance, guess who they were training with? Yep, I don't even have to say it at this point, do I? And now, you might come to Team Khabib's defense by saying that these doping test failures should be viewed on an individual basis, and that there are other gyms that have multiple fighters who have tested positive as well. But here's the difference between Team Khabib and every other gym in the world. With gyms like American Top Team, Syndicate MMA, Extreme Couture, and others, those gyms let more or less anybody train there. As long as you're not breaking basic gym etiquette, you can be an American, a Brazilian, Chinese, Nigerian, Polish, and of course, Dagestani as well. And fighters from those big gyms fight each other all the time. So if somebody is doping at one of those gyms, there's a good chance he gets ratted out. But with that inner circle of Team Khabib guys, the fighters who actually get to go train out in the mountains of Dagestan, they are all Dagestanis. And that means that if, theoretically speaking, the Dagestanis were to be engaging in something similar to the systematic gym-wide doping practices that the Russians were caught engaging in at the 2014 Sochi Olympics, nobody in that team is going to rat them out. I mean, they're all brothers for a reason, right? And on top of that, the gyms in the United States are easy for drug testing authorities to visit and pick up samples, while the same can't be said for Khabib's gym in the mountains of Dagestan. But anyways, let's now talk here a bit at the end about why exactly Team Khabib is treated with the mystical reverence they have, and why major outlets like ESPN go along and play into it. So, as I've explained in a previous video of mine titled The Countless Controversies of Khabib Nurmagomedov, both Khabib and the UFC like to sell an idealized version of him that does not exist in reality. One day Khabib tells you
you fight for money, I fight for legacy.
And the next day he's printing that exact quote on an NFT crypto miner that got pulled from OpenSea for being fraudulent. And well, when it comes to selling an idealized version that doesn't exist in reality, the same goes for Team Khabib. And if you come out and criticize Team Khabib, you'll receive some pretty nasty backlash. A fact that even Ariel Helwani points out.
There may not be a more sensitive fan base than the Team Khabib fan base. I'm sorry. That's just the truth. Like, if you don't overly glaze them in every single way and talk about them like they are the greatest thing in the history of MMA, then you're being a hater. I am not doing that.
I personally dislike Ariel Helwani quite a bit, but we are in agreement on this. The Team Khabib fanbase is extremely annoying, and unless you shower praise upon all those Dagestanis, you're going to be public enemy number one. However, that's part of the reason why mainstream MMA coverage plays into propping up and mythologizing the team. It does big numbers because it's an easy narrative to tell. As I've stated multiple times in the past, a lot of the fanbase for Team Khabib consists of individuals who vicariously live through fighters like Khabib and Islam. And bundling them all together and selling them as a package is easy marketing for promotions like the UFC and the PFL. I mean, there's a reason why the PFL introduced the Khabib cam and puts him in the thumbnail of their YouTube videos, even though he has never competed for them. The narrative of Team Khabib and Father's Plan is easy to sell to a mass audience of casual fans because the hive mind of Khabib worshippers will help to propagate it. And that ends up reinforcing the delusions of that fanbase, which I will not tolerate as a creator in this milieu. So yes, Team Khabib is overrated. They're definitely a great team, but they've lost a lot more than just twice, and they have some genuinely terrible fighters on the main squad. And on top of that, multiple fighters from that team have tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs, with Mavlik Khaybulaev and Zubair Tukhugov having no plausible excuses for their tests, and Usman Nurmagomedov's results being covered up under suspicious circumstances. And when the mainstream tries to push a curated, overinflated, and false narrative around that team, there needs to be pushback. But anyways, thanks for watching or listening until the end. If you made it this far, congratulations on having a fantastic attention span. Goodbye, and I'm happy to be back.